Okay. Morning, all. I I know both of you understand the importance of wills because I think, Charlotte, you've had it hammered at you enough from various sources, and Rachel has as well. But one of the problems for young couples with kids is they think that everything just goes to the spouse if something happens, and if there's no will, and they also think that any kids will just go to friends and family to look after. And this isn't the case in both instances. Firstly, the assets are split between the spouse and the children, which can cause all sorts of problems, and it's a long legal battle as well. And if there's no will with guardians in place, then the children are looked after. They go into the state for the state to look after. And there's some really good decisions made by the state, as everybody knows. I've even come across a situation where the obvious choice was the child's aunt, but because she said to the social workers, we go to church on a Sunday, the social workers' attitude was, we're not having people indoctrinated, and therefore we'll find somewhere else. And they put them into a family that had no relationship, different culture, and even out of the town. So people who don't put these things in place themselves are destroying the family, destroying the kids' lives at times. It can be awful. There are people made homeless by not having wills because they think everything goes to the spouse, and the spouse doesn't get everything and ends up homeless. Because if there's kids about, it doesn't. And if people are in a relationship, partnership, but not married or not civil partnership, and there's no children, their half of the house, their assets all go back to that person's parents, not to the partner. So there's an absolute nightmare if people haven't just done the basics of putting things in place. And it's not a painful conversation. It's not always pleasant, but it can be lighthearted and go through it. I mean, Rachel knows it's, it's not all doom and gloom, is it? It's things you might not want to think about, but it's things that people think about all the time when they haven't got it in place, and not much of the time when they have.
It was so important for us because it made us have the conversations around what we actually wanted, and to get that out in the air, like verbalized, meant that we knew we were both on the same page. It meant that I've got no fears that my husband will not turn off the switch, or turn off the switch if I want him to. And the sort of unsaid things, but having it just laid out in front of you, this is what we want to happen. I won't ever worry that he's going to do something against what I would actually want anymore, because he didn't know. And you can't do something you don't know the answer to. So now he's got a piece of paper that's got it all laid out in front of him. What do I do if? So yeah, for me it's a lot. I know that I can have what I want, basically.
Yeah, and the kids will be looked after properly and aren't at risk of being disinherited as well, which is a danger for some people. And so the wills are hugely important, but for a lot of people, the other thing that's important are lasting powers of attorney. And it's not just for the granny who is beginning to have dementia, because anybody can have an accident, anybody can be ill, and it can be temporary. But while people aren't able to make decisions, who makes the decisions for you? And again, if it isn't written down and registered in a legal format, then the state step in, and they'll step in and decide what you eat, what you drink, where you are, whether you're convalescing at home or in a hospital, whether you're in the hometown, everything about that, once your capacity is gone, then they make decisions. And if you've got kids, they will start making decisions as to what happens to them when a person's ill or in a hospital. And just by filling in the bits of paper and doing the work and registering it and answering it and having a conversation, as Rachel says, not only with the person who does it for you, but also with your partner, it makes a big difference. It opens up everything so that people are more relaxed than they were. There's taking that stress off the shoulders, because loads of people have at the back of their mind, what happens to the children if something happens to me?
So your power of attorney, is that your husband if you're married?
No, well, unless your power of attorney, you can put 2 or 3 people down to make decisions on your file. You can put more down if you want, but a few people down to make decisions if you're not able. Now, normally one's your husband, but actually there is no such thing in law as the next of kin. So even if you are married, if something happens to you and you don't have the powers of attorney, the state make decisions, not your husband. Obviously, sometimes they listen to him, but not always. And doctors don't have to. They cut. If people have powers of attorney, then your spouse can make decisions on your behalf as if they were you. So they're making decisions for you that you know you'd want. Doctors make decisions on behalf of the doctors, fulfilling what they need. And it's not always the same interest. It's not always right for people. They might want something different. And your husband can't have a say unless he's got, or your spouse can't have a say unless they've got powers of attorney in place.
Right. That's worth talking to mums about before they give birth, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks they're for the grannies, but people over 18 should have powers of attorney, you know, in place so that people can make decisions on their behalf. And if people are earning and lose capacity, at least they'll still have a house to come back to if somebody's been looking after their finances while they can't, and making sure the money comes in and the right bills get paid. Whereas if everything just stops, it's a disaster. I mean, there's one person that I know of, and an IFA told me, and this person had all the insurances in place, income protection, family income benefit, everything you could want, critical illness. And he went on a stag do, fell down a manhole, and he's in a complete vegetative state. He'll never come out of it. And it took his wife over 8 months and £4,500 before she could get any of the money to start paying the mortgage. Yeah, if they'd had powers of attorney in place, then the money would have come through next day. Well, you know, within a couple of weeks. So it's little, people don't think about it because it never happens to us, does it? But when it does, it's horrendous. It's put so much stress on everybody around you. And if there's no powers of attorney, you have to end up dealing with a thing called the court of protection. I know people have been in tears dealing with them because they're so controlling, and they do accounts. You have to produce accounts for everything you spend, and they govern everything you spend on your spouse, on the person.
Well, you're already in a difficult situation anyway, aren't you? So it's not.
Yeah. And it's so.
What you want to be doing.
And I hear people say, "Well, we've got joint accounts, so that's okay." Well, the good news is that if you have a joint account and one person loses capacity, they freeze that account, because they are there to protect the vulnerable. Okay, so the vulnerable, they don't know whether the other person is just going to empty the account and whose money it is, so they freeze it. There's no grey areas in this, it's black and white. One thing that's happened twice, once recently, which was in the papers and most people will have read about because it was sort of COVID related, but another one which was slightly more serious was there was a woman had her mother in a care home, which was awful. So she did what most people would do. She went to the care home and took her mother out to take her home to look after, because do a better job. That night, knock on the door, 2 policemen. They take the mother back to the care home and they arrest the daughter, who is taken to court, sentenced to 36 days in jail and served 18 days in prison for abduction because she didn't have powers of attorney. Now, we all know she was going to do a better job, but the Court of Protection looking and saying, well, she might be going to abuse her. Anything could be going on. So we're going to prosecute. I can see you thinking deeply, Charlotte.
Sorry, it's a little bit chaotic here. Let me just...
Yeah, no. Oh, yeah. I hope this is recorded.
There's a lot going on.
Yes. Yeah. Building work. Yeah, so it's simple things, and if anybody wants to talk about it in more depth, give me a shout. I talk for nothing, as one or two will verify.
Yeah, I'll probably it'd be good to. Where are you, Chris? It's gone.
If I move this way, you'll see the details on the back of my sheet. If you've got magnifying glass.
I think it'd be worth having a chat. For me, like, my individual circumstances are quite complicated.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we just chat. We'll get a time slot in and we just chat, and it's really up to you whether you do anything or not. But at least if you've had the conversation, you can start thinking about things and what the options are.
Some juice. Yeah. Come here. For me, I think it'd be good to arrange one-to-one. I have been thinking about it anyway. Do you know why? Because I've seen your advert on the King's Gate.
Oh, right.
And I keep driving past it. Because there's a few adverts where I think, like the Cal one on that billboard, and I just think, you're not even open, shut up. And then yours comes up.
Yeah.
So I have been, it's worked to a degree. It's been in my head. And then when Rachel put this on, I was like, oh yeah, probably better.
But have a think of chat. But
yeah,
it's not. Well, those that know me know I'm not here to do a double glazing salesman's job on you and sit there until you do it. I give information and walk away and let people think about it. And if I don't hear from them again, it's not a big issue. I'd rather people at least were informed. You know, it's not a pressure job, a conversation. We just chat, especially when we can do it over Zoom and you can turn me off when you want.
I've got friends who've gone about wills in different ways. And I know it's kind of like comparing apples and pears, and the best thing is to say, well, I know my apple. But there's like people that I know that have used a trainee solicitor at the university type gig. They've used a write your own will type thing. They might have used a solicitor. I'm trying to think of the other options.
You can write your own will. Straight off, anything is better than nothing. But 85% of self-written wills end up in court with an argument or a problem. Okay, that's just one of those things. Now, somewhere about 60% of people have a will, but half of them are out of date. So you keep the courts busy for a long time. Will writers, that's all we do. We know our field, we really do it. Some solicitors do a lot of solicitors never do a will in their life. And when they get one to do, they hand it, as you say, to the office junior or the clerk to do. Now, I've had a discussion, obviously, with several solicitors over this and that I know well. And their attitude is, there's some awful will writers out there. And I have to agree, there are. But she had to agree. There's some awful solicitors out there. There's some awful wills done by solicitors. You have to be very careful and check what is written. I have come across wills where the wrong beneficiaries have been in it, not done by will writers.
So what happens? So what happens if you want if you want to change your will, do you have to pay every time you want to make a change, or
generally what used to happen was you'd hear the word codicil and it'd be added on at the end that there was a charge for doing. But now, because technology's changed and everything, it's as easy to redo it than add bits on. In fact, it's easier, and people should redo it if it's done to cover as much future as you can. Then that's great, but you should review it every 3, 4, 5 years anyway, just to make. And review it doesn't mean redo it. It means just get it out, read it, and check and make sure it's still what you want, and that the executors are still people you like or talking to, and do that sort of thing. But yes, generally, if you come to change your will, then it's a new will these days, so it's a new charge. But you're not talking thousands of pounds to do a will. The thing has moved on, and one of the things, a real bugbear of mine is a lot of things that go in the will aren't anything going in the will isn't enacted until after the person has died. So you can get a line in to sort of for a provision for a property trust, so that the person's share of the house goes to the children to protect the children, this, that, and the other. And some people charge a couple of £100 for putting that in. It's a line in the will. It shouldn't be an extra cost, but people do. And, oh, well, that's extra, that's extra, that's extra. And they make long, complicated wills to make it look, to justify the fees in a way. I've got to be careful. I'm going to let it's not always the case, but it does happen. Wills should be simple. And I hear the term, and you've heard it, Charlotte. I know you've heard it because you've been in one of the same rooms that I have. There is no such thing as a simple will. Well, there should be. It's not the will that needs to be complicated. It's getting everything sorted in the background into a simple form, so that what we put down in paper is simple and easy to understand and easy to enact. So a lot of the time I spend talking about people's business setups and organization within the family as to what's what, to get that clear in people's heads, and then it's easy to put down. So you need simple, plain wills that do what you want, so that everybody can understand them. So yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just thinking about our particular circumstances and adding people on or taking them off.
Yeah. I mean, if things change, then you really need to review it and redo it. But it depends how far on are you from when you originally did it. So. Well,
we haven't got anything at all, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, if you want a discussion, then 3 of us can have a chat.
Yeah.
Or 2 of us.
Great.
I mean, it's better to have everybody on the conversation, so we're not Chinese whispering what's going on. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But the other thing that people should remember is that every will is different. There is no joint will. So yeah, they might be mirrored, so they reflect each other. But every will is an individual document, so that your partner, one partner can change the will if something happens to the other person. And I've seen that happen, where it was all agreed to leave everything between 3 or 5 kids or whatever it is, coming from different families, and they've all been together for 20 odd years. And as soon as one person's died, all their children have been cut out of the will. And so, I'd argue that hadn't been thought through properly, because everybody says, oh, I trust my partner implicitly, until they don't, or until they split or one person dies. So you have to look on what might happen, not what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, we lost.
So yeah, but
we lost family money through a spouse of a grandparent, who, after the grandparent had died, the spouse completely wrote off our side of the family, and my mum tried to contest it, but it was a legal document. So
yeah, wills can be varied if everybody agrees. I mean, it costs a bit to do, but one of the cases was one of the sort of ones that hit the papers, of course, was when the Miliband's changed their father's will so that they could avoid a load of tax, because it wasn't written with tax in mind or that sort of stuff. So they changed it so they could save a load of inheritance tax. But for somebody to claim against the will, they have to show dependency or some reason why they should. So if a kid's excluded, there can be an argument. Doesn't necessarily mean they win. There was a case recently where a person disputed a mother's will because she'd left the daughter something like £100,000 and left the lifeboats the rest. And the daughter disputed it, saying she deserved more. And the courts went against her, and the court fees for her and the lifeboats, because she lost, she had to pay both, was over the £100,000 she inherited. When it comes to money, people are stupid. You know, they do silly things. Maybe calling them stupid is wrong, but they do stupid things. They'll fight over anything. And one of my stories I like is a lawyer went with two sisters to the mother's house so they could pick which they wanted, what they wanted. And the two daughters were fighting over a coat and nearly ripped it in half. And it was the lawyer's coat that she'd hung up as she'd walked in. You know, I think there's some great sort of anecdotes, stories, and what have you, all rooted in fact. So
I think one of the ones that I liked was around how long has the longest will been contested.
Well, yeah, he did have a will, but he hadn't signed it. He was going to get it signed. He fell ill, went home, recovered okay, forgot about it, and died 3 months later or so. And he was the richest commoner in England, he was referred to in 1790s. And he left £2 million then, which is about 250 million these days. No kids, no wife. So all the extended relatives started piling in and paying money to argue their case. And the case went on for 117 years. And the question I always ask is, where did all the money go? Who got the money in the end? No, it all went to solicitors fighting. They spent every last penny. That's why it ended. And it closed down just at the start of the First World War.
Okay, we're going to have to go because somebody's
Okay.
at the door.
All right.
But
Good
nice
to see you.
to you, Tony. Leo,
Go. Somebody's going to get eaten.
Okay, bye.
See you later.
So Tony, if you can go through your how to get in touch with you, and then we'll close down the recording for everyone.
Okay, yeah, the easiest way to get in touch with me is tony@thelegacystudio.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
No, that's not the button I want. I want the stop recording, which is moved up here.